that one of the little Palestinian girls came over and said, "You will cry our tears now, but we'll cry your tears later."
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on 22 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org. We begin with two videos about the shameful situation in the Gaza Strip. The first from early December, people walking through sewage water because lack of electricity caused the closing of sewage plants, and then there were massive leaks. Then a few weeks later, when record rains caused flooding in Gaza streets, and thousands had to abandon their homes and seek shelter in unheated buildings. The bulk of the program is coverage about the U.S. campaign to end the Israeli occupation, their organizers' conference some months ago, discussions about building alliances. We'll hear from Comanche Nation member Melissa Franklin, Reem Barghouti of Adala, New York, and Hatem Barzian of the American Muslims for Palestine. Then some good news, very good news, about the extent of national coverage of the decision of the American Studies Association to join the academic boycott of Israel. We begin in Gaza City. We can't show you the stink, but remember this is sewage-filled water, compliments of Israel, Egypt, and the U.S., which collaborated to destroy the tunnels which brought fuel to Gaza.
هزش هاي صور ساكن المية خلاص خليك يا سيف خلاص ايوه ارفع احنا تعايرنا واحد اللي احنا بنشوفهاش انتوا الاثنين سمك بحمد الله اطلع صورة عالي يلا
In the middle of December, the Gaza Strip received an amount of rain equal to its annual rainfall in just 2 days. Normally, when there are natural catastrophes, international aid agencies rush with supplies and equipment. Not so the Gaza Strip, because there live the Palestinians, whom the masters of the world treat as subhumans, allowing things in only with the greatest of difficulty.
الله يا عبد الله. هذا فوق.
في سفينة الغادة في على الوان هذا البراءة
طلع جبيننا نوم لا في عمال نظافة هنا ولا في عمال نظافة تحت. أنا الصبح كلها نظفت ولميت السجاير مغطينا ومداريها بس على العشاء. انتوا صحة هتجيبوا الجنة الداعمون وين ولا شيء شايفين. احنا بدنا ننطلق مش قادرين نحكي. وينه؟ لا ده كل يوم واحد بموت يعني. وين نروح؟ بيصوروا في الشبابات النام بيصوروا في الشيء. هذا منظر. وين الدعم اللي اجى؟ وين راح الدعم اللي اجى امبارح؟ وينه؟ ودونا بالدحلمات. الله يكفونا بقى يا الله عليهم الله يا ولا حليب ولا شيء ولا حاجه. الله ده ظلم بعينه. اللي طلعنا نتحجر دول ما نبي نتحجر. وين؟ مية يجيبوا شغل عشان نتحجر. ايش الذنب اللي ارتكبوه؟ حرام ان نعيش ونكون لنا مستقبل. ايش الذنب اكثر من هيك يعني؟ قاهر من وين نروح؟
غريب الصوت بس
حتى لو عشان بس الحليب بيشربوا كاسة شاي يقوموا من جمالين الصبح. يشربوها طبعا من الصبح.
As late as December 21st, streets were still flooded. There are few pumps and little electricity to keep them going. Now Melissa Franklin of the Comanche Nation speaking in Washington in September.
I also wanted to talk about my experiences in going to Palestine. Like she said, I organized the Indigenous delegation of Palestine in 2009. As I started going to doing some report backs, I was amazed at always getting involved with and hearing the knowledge that people have of Palestine and their struggle here in the U.S. and how little they knew about the struggle here about Native people. So I kind of want to focus just a little bit as I pose a question about what in your communities, in your organizations, have you done in efforts to reach out to the indigenous communities around, and what have been your experiences in the indigenous communities reaching out to support your organization or your cause or what? So I just kind of want to start off more so about some of the movements over the years, particularly 60s, 70s, and 80s. I know a lot of people know a little bit about this, but I wanted to talk what about made these movements relevant, and the simple answer is continued failed policy. it was probably around the 1930s whenever they had like the Reorganization Act, which actually gave Native people the right to their self-government. They were for the longest time not involved in any kind of decision-making process for their own affairs. It was the first time since the 1860s that they actually were involved in these processes. They were controlled before that, and to this day, by men in Washington, usually white men in Washington that had never visited a reservation and had no desire to do so. It wasn't until about the 1943 when, a little before that, they did conducted a survey of the conditions in Indian country, and I don't use that word, but it is the word that we quote, Indian. And so I wanted to say that during that time they conducted a survey on about the conditions that they gave us, the conditions that were posed on us, and at some point they didn't understand that. I guess the savagery, the lifestyles that were posed on us, they were our fault. They were our fault. They were trying to figure out a way that they could make lives better for the Native people without even coming to visit and understand what these policies in place have done to our people. In 1943, they passed the Termination Act, and this was to basically abolish all Native tribes, all of the assistance that was given and their responsibility of the Native people had with the government. Benefits. Every aspect of our lives of Native people are under the Department of Interior. There's a bureau, a lot of you know, the Bureau of Indian Affairs. There's also a bureau, or an Office of Special Trustee for the American Indian, which is supposed to, not that it does, honor the fiduciary trust responsibilities that the Native people have, or the government has with the Native people. During this time, excuse me, during this time, the Termination Act lasted probably around about 1953 to 1968, when a lot of the movements started becoming, there started to be a lot of resistance in the Native people. They call the movements Red Power. And I just want to kind of touch on a few of these and posing that question about what have we done to support each other in our communities. One of the ones that kicked off the start of what we call Red Power was in Washington State. There were people that were arrested for fishing, for their daily lives, for trying to just survive. And I thought there's a lot of people that you can see, and all the people that we know of Native American activists. I love every one of them, but there are also those people that a lot of people don't know about, and some very brave men and women that I truly admire. And one of them is by the name of Sidney Mills. He was Yakima and also Cherokee, but he served in the Army. He served in combat in Vietnam, and he was critically wounded. He came back and he made a declaration, and it says, I just want to read this. He said, "I owe and swear my first allegiance to the Indian people and the sovereign rights of many tribes. Owing this allegiance to the commitment it draws me to, I hereby renounce further obligation to service or duty in the United States Army." A lot of these people were asked to go and serve in the Army to protect rights of other people, when in their own communities there were so many injustices in their own communities. That basically is one of the movements that started the entire Red Power across the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We're a lot, of course, aware of the Alcatraz, the 19-month occupation of Alcatraz in 1969. There were just so many treaties. Of course, the Trail of Broken Treaties, you'll hear it. I suggest to read or look at Vine Deloria Jr.'s 20 points. It talks about some of the ideas of how to make our policies better, our policy making process in these failed treaties. Like I said, every aspect of our life is we're wards of the government. That's what a lot of people refer to, wards of the government. Our healthcare, our welfare, our education, every aspect of our life is under the Department of Interior. But the Alcatraz sparked, national attention, of course, and that was a federal treaty that gave some tribes the right to abandon federal property, and this is what they were claiming at the time. There are so many things across solidarity over the years. I know there were several AIM members that were really traveled to Palestine. I know several of them that I was able to hear them speak about that and share. When I went, I usually go, anytime I go to travel or come to speak, or I go see my elders and I ask them for guidance. That's just how our people do. We follow the lead of those who've already been there and those who've already paved the way for us, because as Native people we think not only of what we can do tomorrow and what we can do for our children, we think 7 generations ahead. When I was in Palestine, we did cultural exchange with a lot of the young people, and we were always faced with cameras in our face and always having to talk and interview. And one day we went and we stopped the wall there and met Jamil, and went upstairs and we turned off all the cameras, we turned off all devices of any sort, and we sat and just broke bread and we talked. And during that time, we talked the issue of violence against women in our communities because of this oppression that has driven us to poverty and all these other aspects of our lives. We started talking about violence against women, and I went to a tribal college in Kansas that opened in 1884 as a boarding school. So there's so much tragic history there. And you ever hear of historical trauma. In our Native people, we call it intergenerational grief. And we have to remember of something that we don't talk about in building these movements, is the healing of certain things. I know a lot of people are not in those spaces to begin to heal, but at that moment we started talking about this, and one of the ladies, there were 3 of us that went from the tribal college, and one lady started talking about the sterilization of our women, and she completely lost it. I started talking, I tried to pick up where she left off. I lost it. The gentleman, he lost it. And at that moment, we were shedding tears, and one thing, and I'm gonna get a little choked up, that one of the little Palestinian girls came over and said, "You will cry our tears now, but we'll cry your tears later." And whoo, choked me up. And at that moment, 3 of us, out of all of us natives at that moment, begin to heal. So there is hope in having that support for each other. It's not just about the actions that you do, it's also about our spiritual well-being. And now we are able to begin that healing process. And it's only going to make us stronger for when we need to be there for other people. So thank you very much.
Reem Barghouti of Adala, New York, tells about one of their campaigns and the necessity of being upfront with allied groups.
So a limited focus can sometimes get you better results. There's also the issue of conflicting agendas, and again, somebody raised this yesterday, right? So I'll give you an example. Adala, New York has had a long-standing campaign against Africa, Israel, and Lev Levayev, right, who built settlements in Palestinian land, and he also mines diamonds, right? So Africa, Israel, and Lev Levayev are planning a building project in East Harlem. It made bells, go off for us, a great opportunity to organize with housing rights activists, right? But at the same time, there are important concerns that we are struggling with, not least of which is that while our focus is only to end Africa, Israel's involvement, obviously interest is to end all these types of gentrification projects. So what happens if we do succeed and get Africa Israel out? Are we going to continue our campaign with these housing rights groups? Or are we going to say, thank you very much, goodbye? This is something that you have to understand and you have to think about before you start this type of campaign and really make a concerted decision. Yes, we want to do this for the long run. This is going to be part of our long-standing campaign. Or really, we need to be upfront with them and say, we can work with you on this, but then we can't work beyond that. As activists, we also have to be aware of the connections between struggles, but we sometimes have really limited knowledge. Just because we're progressive doesn't mean we know everything, right? So there are nuances. There are nuances in every political movement. There are power struggles within every political movement, and you cannot look from the outside and understand those. So who are the people that you want to connect with? Do they have fundamental values that you share? Is it just that they have one social issue that you do agree on, but then there's not other basis for a value for respect and commonality, right? And what are you going to create problems by trying to work with one group as opposed to a different group? So these are other issues that we have to really be aware of. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about is we have to be mindful also in terms of other people standing in solidarity with us, because there are those that use the Palestinian movement to kind of hide some deep-seated racism, right? So you have those that support the BDS movement because they see it as a secular movement and it's better than, the Islamists taking over. So, they're kind of hiding this really deep-seated Islamophobia, right? Or there are those that have a fear or a hatred of Jews and are kind of trying to hide their anti-Semitism behind BDS organizing. And I think that there's no place for these individuals within this movement, right? It's our ongoing duty as activists to oppose racism in all its forms. We're not working to replace, one oppressed group with another. We're working to challenge the structures that are keeping all of us down in order to attain the justice and the rights and equality that we all do deserve. Thank you.
Hatem Barzian of American Muslims for Palestine warns us that repression used on Palestinians then is used on all of us.
Now, in the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s, we were dealing with the Arab terrorist. Arab/Palestinian terrorist. It was the PLO, the PFLP, DFLP, and any organization that was identified with the Palestine struggle was demonized. That's why in 1987 we have the LA 8 case, where 7 Palestinian and a Kenyan woman were arrested and derailed by the Reagan administration, which wanted to utilize immigration laws for security purposes. Now is the standard operating procedure. The infusion of immigration laws with the national security structure is a fact of life across the board. But it was the Palestinian case, the LA 8 case, demonizing Palestinians who were active for the work of Palestine in the US, that began to change and alter the whole picture of the linking between immigration and national security. Now, the LA 8 case continued to be with us until just the most recent past, just yesterday. Because every new law that was passed, including the Patriot Act, it was retroactively applied to the LA 8 case. And their case made it to the Supreme Court, where many horrendous decisions coming out of it, specifically one that separated between the rights of citizens and the rights of green card holders, permanent residents. They don't enjoy the same rights politically. They don't enjoy the same rights of freedom of association, freedom of speech. That came directly out of the ruling relative to LA 8 case.
You recall I did promise some good news. The American Studies Association in mid-December approved a resolution joining the academic boycott of Israeli colleges and universities. Now, boycotts of Israel are going on all over the world, but the Zionists have been pretty successful in quarantining the United States from the justice movement. So this resolution was quite a shock to them. It made the front page of the New York Times. It was on CNN and many other national news sources. As you can imagine, there's a furious counterattack. All kinds of condemnations coming from American university presidents in attempts to destroy the ASA financially. On the other hand, people in the justice movement are coming to support of the ASA. A few days ago, the ASA received support of the Native American and Indigenous Studies Association when they made their own resolution joining the academic boycott. Go to our site, thestruggle.org, to hear an interview I did with one of the leaders of the ASA and to see how you can help. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.